because the leftists should have been the ones that were most skeptical about the bloody pharmaceutical companies. And they jumped on the vaccine bandwagon in exactly the same way that you're doing right now.
Pharmaceutical companies have helped us tremendously throughout the...
Right, there we go. Fine. No,
I don't think
so. No, I don't think so.
You're just wrong.
I think you're utterly wrong. I see. So you don't think that the pharmaceutical companies who dominate the advertising landscape with 75% of the funding are corrupt?
I don't. Corrupt is a very broad.
No. It's.
Do you think that
corrupt with a tinge of malevolence?
Do you think
willing to extract money out of people by putting their health on the line? You don't believe that?
Do you think that we get effective drugs from pharmaceutical companies?
Not particularly.
Okay. Do you think that any vaccines work?
Yes.
Do you think that any...
I don't think 80 of them work at once for babies. I think that's a little risky.
But yet we've been on this vaccine schedule for how many decades?
Like
and babies don't...
Like this. Not like this. Not carefully.
I had a ton of vaccines when I was a child. I'm pretty sure that was the norm for people. There were a ton of vaccines you had to take.
There's way more now.
Okay. And you think that...
Well, and you can understand why. I mean, look, part of it, no doubt, part of it is a consequence of the genuine willingness to protect children. But the moral hazard is quite clear. And people on the left used to be aware of this.
What do you think the mRNA vaccine, the speeding up of it came from? How do you make for the fact that it was Donald Trump that did warp speed?
Terror. Foolish panicking, just like we're doing with the climate issue.
So you think Trump was
panicking?
Was he in bed with the pharmaceuticals? Was he working with the left? Or was it just that was the only panicky thing he made? He didn't try to push for the mass lockdowns like other far left people would have wanted him to do. That was just the one mistake he made, was the pushing for the vaccine?
No, I think Trump undoubtedly made all sorts of mistakes and it certainly wasn't only the left that stampeded toward the forced COVID vaccine debacle. But it was most surprising to me that it emerged on the left, because the left at least had been protected against the depredations of gigantic predatory corporations by their skepticism of the gigantic enterprises that can engage in regulatory capture. And that just vanished.
Is it not possible that maybe people looked and they said, hey, if all the governments, all the institutions, all the schools, all the private companies across all the countries around the world are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it is the case that this vaccine just helps. Is that not possible?
Oh, sure. Of course it's possible, but that didn't mean it was right.
Well,
they used force. They used force.
We use force for all sorts of things in terms of public health.
We don't generally use force to invade people's bodies.
How long have vaccine mandates been a thing? In Canada, the United States, and the entire world?
I don't think they should have been a thing.
That's great if you don't think they should have been, but when you say we don't generally use force, we absolutely use force. We've enforced vaccines for a long time. It's an important part of public health.
Fair enough. We did it on a scale and at a rate during the COVID pandemic, so-called pandemic, that was unparalleled. And the consequence of that was that we injected billions of people with an experimental, and it wasn't a bloody vaccine.
Of course
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
It's not.
Does it have a 100% success rate? You think it's a definition of vaccine? The whole point of the vaccine is to give your body a protein to train on so that your immune system works. Who cares if it's not the same? There's different types.
They used the word vaccine so that they didn't have to contend with the fact that it wasn't the same technology.
There are different types of vaccines.
There certainly
that are different technologies.
Fine.
The mRNA vaccines is a type of vaccine technology. This used to be
vaccines. Now this is vaccines.
No, it was like this and now it's like this.
No. It was like this and now it's like this. The mRNA technology was a radical qualitative leap forward in technology. You can call it a vaccine if you want to, but it bears very little resemblance to any vaccine that went before that. And the reason it was called a vaccine was because vaccine was a brand name that had a track record of safety, and shoehorning it in that was one of the ways to make sure that people weren't terrified of the technology. And
I think the reason it's called a vaccine is because they're injecting you with something that's inoculating you against something in the future, because it has proteins that resemble a virus that infects your immune system.
There are overlaps between the mRNA technologies and vaccines, to be sure. But they wouldn't have been put forward with the rate that they were put forward if they weren't a radical new technology. And it's bad in principle to inject billions of people with an untested new technology.
Isn't it also bad in principle for billions of people to get infected with a worldwide pandemic that initially was causing a decent number of deaths, a ton of complications, shutting down world economies?
Maybe it was. Maybe it was.
So shouldn't we be
It
able to
looks
engage in that analysis and figure out, like, if we look at the
We're
side
not
effects of the
engaging
vaccine-
in the analysis.
No, because now we're talking about whether or not
pretending nothing
vaccines are even
happened.
vaccines or not instead.
No, don't play that game. That is not what I was doing. I was making a very specific and careful case. The mRNA technology, by wide recognition, is an extraordinarily novel technology. And
That doesn't make it not a vaccine, though.
Well, okay, it's a radically transformed form of vaccine. I don't give a
make
damn.
updates,
That still makes it something so new that the potential danger of its mass administration was highly probable to be at least or more dangerous than the thing that it was supposed to protect against. And we are seeing that in the excess
We are
deaths.
absolutely not saying. So are you implying none of the
Yeah,
excess deaths
right.
were caused by the vaccines? Or
I don't bloody well know what they're
that's what you're
caused by.
implying now.
Well, look, if you're going to use Occam's razor, you're kind of stuck in an awkward place here.
I'm
Because you
absolutely not stuck in it. This is
Yes.
the most administered vaccine in or inoculation, or whatever you prefer to call it, in the history of all of mankind. Every single organization around the world is motivated to call this out if it was a bad thing. You don't think Russia or China would be screaming if Donald Trump or the United States warp sped through a vaccine that was having deleterious effects on populations all around the world? You don't think there wouldn't be some academic institution? You didn't think there'd be more than a handful of doctors and Joe Rogan and some conservatives saying this vaccine might have been bad if it was the case that American companies working with companies in Europe and Germany especially, why? Because that's where BioNTech is from, in order to create or manufacture a vaccine that was causing excess deaths all around the world. There are so many different people that would be motivated to call this out. How do you explain
They
the
are
fact that
calling it out.
No, it's a handful of people. Where are the governments
Look,
calling it out? Where are
it's
the
always
academic institutions calling it out? Where are the other private companies calling it out? Wouldn't you stand to make a killing if you were a private company in Europe and you could say, look, the mRNA vaccines for sure are causing all of these issues? Why wouldn't Putin? Why wouldn't Xi Jinping? Why wouldn't anybody else in the world call this out if it was as horrible as it was?
There are plenty of people attempting to call
Nobody
out that-
credible and no huge institution.
What do you make of the excess deaths? You haven't come up with a bloody hypothesis.
I don't even know if there are 20% at the excess deaths in Europe right now. If I had to guess off the top of my head, it's going to be, like you said, one might be lingering effects of an overwhelmed healthcare system. Another one might be deaths related to the war in Ukraine. Another one might be rising energy costs that have
But it's
happened for a couple of
absolutely
reasons.
impossible that any of it could be unintended consequences of a novel technology injected into billions of people.
I think that if excess, first of all, there aren't billions of people in Europe. So if there were
didn't say
excess
there
deaths,
were.
I understand, but you're talking about excess deaths in Europe. I'm not aware of excess deaths that exist in other places that are completely and totally unaccounted for, where the only explanation could be the vaccine. I think if there were, I think more people would be talking about it.
Well, first of all, the number of people talking about something is not an indication of the scientific validity of a claim.
I
Quite the
agree with that,
contrary.
but for a
Well, then
vaccine
why
that
are
was-
you using mass consensus as the determinant of what constitutes
Because
truth?
I think for
That's
something,
never been the case.
Because I think for something that was given to billions and billions of people, if this was something that was having a measurable effect on people, it would be impossible to cover it up or ignore it.
Well,
We
what do
wouldn't
you-
have to look at the one case
right.
brought up on a documentary. We wouldn't have to look at the one thing being talked about.
Then what do you make
but
of the VAERS data?
the ver-
There's more negative side effects reported from the mRNA vaccines than there were reported for every single vaccine ever created since the dawn of time, and not by a small margin. So it's not just the excess deaths.
I agree.
It's the VAERS data.
What is VAERS data?
It's the database that until the COVID-19 pandemic emerged and we had the unfortunate consequence that there were so many side effects being reported, it was the gold standard for determining whether or not vaccines were safe. And now as soon as it started to misbehave on the mRNA vaccine front, we decided that we were going to doubt the validity of the VAERS reporting system.
Okay, the VAERS reporting system never been the gold standard for anything. VAERS reporting is just if you want to report that there is some issue that you have after getting a vaccine. That's it. I think it's
What do you mean
vaccine
that's it?
adverse.
What the hell do you think it was set up for?
To report adverse events
Why?
that happen after a vaccine,
Why?
to track and see if something was related to the vaccine.
Right.
So
Why?
most people didn't even know VAERS existed until after the COVID vaccine. Once people know that it exists, of course, more people are going to engage with it. But what happens?
So
when
it's
you
all
submit a
noise.
report? No, it could be or it couldn't be. So what do you do when a bunch of stuff?
Well, you first of all might begin
when
by suggesting that maybe it's not all noise.
Correct. So when
Especially
all
given
of
the
these
excess
things are
deaths.
admitted to VAERS, what they do is from there they investigate. All you can do, all VAERS is I might go and get a vaccine, and maybe in 3 days I go, I got a headache. I'm going to go ahead and like call my doctor and make this report. And they'll say, okay, well, it's an adverse event after vaccine. Doesn't mean the vaccine caused the headache. And now that more people know about this system than ever.
I'm saying
I'm just saying that theirs is not the gold standard of determining if a vaccine is working or not.
What?
Compared to actual longitudinal, prospective, randomized controlled trial
You
studies.
mean like the ones they should have done to the goddamn vaccines?
Like the ones that they did do for the vaccines and they continue to do to this day. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yes,
You really
correct.
think that you're in a position to evaluate the scientific credibility of the trials for the vaccines, do you?
No,
Really?
I don't. So I have to trust.
Then what are you
I
doing?
have to do, what I
don't trust
I
them.
have to
I looked
trust
at the bloody data.
First of all, you have to trust third parties to some extent. When you go outside,
I don't have to trust
Of course you do. You do every day. When you turn the keys in your car, you hope your engine doesn't explode. When you're drinking water, you hope that the public water or whatever tap or bottled water you got it out of isn't contaminated or poisoned with cholera.
I don't
when
do
you
that as a consequence of consensus.
No, you of course you do.
No, I don't. I do that as a consequence of observing multiple times that when I put the goddamn key in the ignition, the truck started.
Why do you know it's going to start the 50th or the 100th time? Why do you, how
Don't
many times
play
do you wear
Hume
those?
with me.
I'm
You know
not
perfectly
playing
well
Hume.
why.
You don't know if the denim in those jeans isn't leaking into your bloodstream. To some extent, we have to trust third-party institutions to make
Except when they
determination.
use force. How about that?
Especially when they use force. We trust the police officers. We trust the
We
judicial
do.
systems.
We do. We on the left trust the police, do we?
To some extent, do we? If somebody's breaking
That's
into your
why we
house, who do you
defund
call?
them.
I'm not a defunder, but if somebody's breaking into your house, you can be the most defund person in the world. Who are you going to call? Are you going to call your neighbor? Are you going to call Joe Biden? Are you going to call Obama? Are you going to call the Black Panthers? You're going to call the cops.
Okay, so tell me this.